Zara had long understood that among her people, she represented nothing more than a liability. The Keth were a race born for war, their forms sculpted for combat, tall, imposing figures wrapped in gleaming crimson scales that caught the light of their world's dual suns. Power wasn't merely valued among her species, it was revered above all else. Those who lacked physical prowess weren't destroyed outright, but they were treated as though they had never existed at all. Zara had emerged from her shell without the ability to walk, while her clutch mates had stumbled onto their feet within moments, claws scraping against the frigid stone of the hatching chambers. She had remained motionless, unable to follow. Her birth mother had been the first to turn away, then the others followed suit. She was abandoned there, small and helpless, forgotten. The Keth saw no purpose in wasting resources on the useless. Unlike her peers, she received no mentor to guide her development. No one taught her combat techniques, hunting methods, or weapon mastery. Whenever she attempted to drag herself into training sessions, she was met with nothing but ridicule. Does it believe it can fight? One of the younger soldiers had sneered, his tail swishing with amusement. Perhaps if it possessed legs, another had cackled, delivering a kick that sent her tumbling across the floor. She had curled inward, burning with a mixture of fury and shame, but refused to shed tears. Instead, she turned her attention to what the others dismissed: technology. The Keth saw little value in machines beyond warfare, but Zara discovered there was strength in knowledge. She spent her youth salvaging damaged equipment, learning its inner workings, reconstructing fragments into something functional. If physical power was beyond her reach, she would master intellectual power. If her body couldn't serve as a weapon, her mind would. This was how Zara endured alone. But endurance wasn't the same as truly living. She had never expected anything to change until the outsider arrived. Zara first noticed him in the salvage yards, a graveyard of discarded technology where she spent most of her time. It was the single place where no one bothered her. The Keth had no use for the broken, so they abandoned their machinery just as they had abandoned their disabled. The human stood out immediately. He was shorter than a Keth, but solidly built, his weathered skin marked by old scars. His dark eyes were alert, constantly scanning his surroundings as if anticipating danger at every moment. His clothing a faded, grease-stained work suit marked him as a technician, not a warrior. He was different from the other humans who had come to Nethys. Most had arrived as part of the Intergalactic Peace Initiative, a desperate attempt to forge better relations between their species. Humans were fixers, meddlers, always trying to repair things that weren't theirs to mend. Zara wanted nothing to do with them. So when a human crouched beside her, watching as she worked on a partially dismantled surveillance unit, she growled, "You're wasting your time, outsider." Her voice was sharp, her elongated ears twitching with irritation. Go help someone who matters. He didn't leave. Instead, he leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. Who says you don't matter? Zara froze. No one had ever said that to her before. She narrowed her glowing crimson eyes, studying him more closely. His hands were rough, calloused from years of work. He smelled faintly of metal and oil, not the sterile, antiseptic scent of the other human diplomats. A worker, a builder, not a talker, she scoffed. I know how your kind operates. You see something broken and you try to fix it, but I'm not your charity project, outsider. His lips quirked into a half smile. Good, I'm terrible at charity. Zara frowned. He wasn't looking at her with pity. He wasn't looking at her like she was pathetic. He was looking at her like she was interesting. You know, he said, nodding toward the dismantled unit at her feet. That's a Mark 12 reconnaissance drone, human built. Zara's grip on her tool tightened. Obviously. Think you can fix it? She bared her fangs. I wouldn't be working on it if I couldn't. Then prove it. Zara bristled at the challenge, but she didn't hesitate. If there was one thing she despised, it was being underestimated. Her claws moved swiftly, recalibrating circuits, realigning delicate wiring. She didn't even need to think, her hands knew what to do. Within minutes, the drone hummed to life, its red optical sensor blinking as its systems came online. Zara sat back, smug. The human whistled. Impressive. Not bad at all. Zara should have felt satisfied. Instead, she felt seen. It was unsettling. The human stood, dusting his hands on his jumpsuit. I'm Marcus. By the way, Marcus Kane. She said nothing. Names implied connection, and She had long since learned that connections led to disappointment. But Marcus didn't seem to mind the silence. He turned to leave, but then hesitated. I used to be in the colonial fleet, he said casually. Wasn't strong enough, fast enough, good enough. He glanced at her. People like to pretend only the strong survive, but it's the smart who survive. The stubborn survive. He tilted his head. You seem like both. Zara's stomach twisted. She hated how easily he had read her. She forced a smirk. So what? You think we're the same? Marcus chuckled. No. His gaze flicked to her half-finished projects, to the metal scraps she had transformed into something useful. You're smarter than me. Zara didn't have an answer for that. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't sure if she wanted one. Zara told herself she wouldn't think about the human Marcus Kane. The name felt foreign in her mind, something that didn't belong in the grim, metallic world she had built for herself. And yet, as she sat alone in the salvage yard, recalibrating a faulty power cell, she realized her hands weren't as steady as usual. It was infuriating. She had spent her entire life ignored, discarded like one of the broken machines she scavenged. That was the way of the Keth, survival of the strongest, rejection of the weak. She had learned to live with it. She had accepted it, and then he had come along, offering something dangerous. Acknowledgement, Zara snarled, tightening the last bolt on the power cell before shoving it aside. It didn't matter. He didn't matter. She had no interest in human aid programs, no interest in their constant need to fix things that weren't theirs to fix. Humans had been on Nethys for years now, desperately trying to establish an alliance, offering resources, technology, diplomatic nonsense. The Keth warlords tolerated them because their machines were useful, their weapons efficient. But they would never respect them. Strength could not be bought, and the Keth did not kneel to outsiders. Zara agreed. At least, she had thought she did. She cursed under her breath and forced herself back to work, determined to forget the human and his infuriatingly warm eyes. She almost succeeded, until she heard the sound of approaching footsteps. Zara's claws instinctively tightened around her tool, her body coiling like a predator preparing to strike. Few ever came near the salvage yard. The Keth had no use for the weak, and they certainly had no use for her. But the footsteps didn't belong to one of her kind. They were too light to measured. She didn't have to turn around to know who it was. Marcus came to a stop a few feet away, hands in the pockets of his jumpsuit. He wasn't wearing the polished, stiff uniform of the human diplomats. His was faded, worn, stained with grease and real work. Zara exhaled sharply through her nose. You again? Marcus grinned. Me again. She set down her tools with exaggerated patience. If you're here to offer me a job again, save your breath. He tilted his head slightly. You remember that, huh? Zara growled. I remember everything, outsider. Good, he said, dropping into a crouch beside her. That'll make this easier. She resisted the urge to snap at him. I don't need whatever it is you're offering. Marcus raised an eyebrow, glancing at the disassembled parts scattered around her workspace. Could have fooled me. Zara's jaw tightened. She knew what he saw, her world built from scraps, held together by sheer will. And yet, for all her intelligence, for all her skill, she was still trapped here. Marcus's voice softened. You ever wonder why we're here, Zara? She tensed at the sound of her name on his tongue, to familiar, to personal. She forced a smirk. Not particularly. Liar. Her scales bristled, but he continued before she could snap at him. Most people think we're here for strategy. That we want to study the Keth, maybe learn how to be like you. He shook his head. But that's not it. The truth is, humans know what it's like to be weak, to be discarded. Zara's breath hitched before she could stop it. Marcus didn't seem to notice, or maybe he did and simply chose not to mention it. My grandfather fought in the Terran border wars, he said, his voice almost casual. He came back, missing both legs, couldn't walk, couldn't fight. In the military, that meant he was done. They thanked him for his service, then left him to rot. Zara swallowed, suddenly too aware of her own useless limbs, of the way she had dragged herself across the cold stone floors of her childhood, alone, because no one had cared. Marcus leaned back slightly, his gaze steady. You remind me of him, Zara. Hated the way her chest tightened at that. She forced herself to scoff. I suppose this is the part where you tell me how he found hope and became a hero. Marcus chuckled. Hell no, he was bitter, mean as hell, but he was smart. And when people finally gave him the right tools, he proved that strength doesn't always come from a working pair of legs. He held her gaze. I think you could do the same. The words settled in her, heavier than she wanted them to be. Zara had never needed validation from anyone. She had never wanted it, but Marcus wasn't offering pity. He wasn't offering charity. He was offering a challenge. And that was something she understood. She exhaled slowly. You're persistent, outsider. Marcus grinned. I get that a lot. Zara hesitated, then glanced at the half-functional drone beside her. Her fingers flexed against the metal. If she accepted his offer, it wouldn't change what she was. She would still be different, still be rejected by her people. But for the first time, she wondered if that mattered. Her eyes flicked back to Marcus. Fine, she said, voice steady. But if you annoy me, I'll disassemble you like one of my drones. Marcus smirked. Deal. And just like that, her world shifted. Zara had never worked with a team before. She didn't trust groups, didn't trust anyone really. Life had taught her that reliance on others led to disappointment, or worse, rejection. She reminded herself of this as she maneuvered through the repair station, scanning the work orders stacked on a datapad. The place had an irritating rhythm to it. Mechanics shouting over the hiss of plasma torches, the hum of welding arms, the sharp scent of burnt metal and grease hanging in the air. She didn't belong here. And yet, for some reason, she hadn't left. For the past week, Marcus had been giving her increasingly difficult tasks, watching how she worked, testing her limits. At first, she thought he was trying to prove something, that he was just another human trying to play hero. But he wasn't. He never questioned her skills, never acted surprised when she completed a repair faster than expected, never treated her like she was some fragile thing in need of saving. It unsettled her. She had spent her whole life being ignored or underestimated. Marcus did neither. Still, she kept her distance, watching, evaluating, until the day he handed her a datapad and said, "Think you can handle something real?" She scanned the details: a damaged dropship, its thruster system fried from a failed test flight. Most of the external plating was intact, but the stabilizers were shot, and the power systems were completely unstable. Zara frowned. Who the hell was piloting this? A blind Rodari? Marcus chuckled. Close. New recruits with more enthusiasm than common sense. She flicked through the schematics. A mess, but fixable. I'll handle the external stabilizers, Marcus said, stretching his arms. You take the internal power systems. We'll meet in the middle. Zara hesitated. She wasn't used to working with someone else on something this complex. She had always done things her way, at her own pace. Trusting someone else to do their half right, that was the real challenge. Still, she wasn't about to back down. Fine. They got to work. The dropship loomed over the hangar, suspended by reinforced gravity locks. Its engines were scorched, wires dangling from the underbelly, fuel lines exposed and leaking fumes. Zara climbed into the internal maintenance hatch, squeezing into the cramped space beneath the main console. The heat from the failing power core pressed against her skin, the scent of burnt circuits thick in the air. Perfect. She worked in silence, her claws moving quickly, bypassing damaged conduits and rerouting power surges. Every piece of this ship's design was inefficient, patched together with human brute force rather than precision engineering. Marcus's voice crackled over the com. How's it looking in there? Zara exhaled sharply. Like someone built it out of spare parts and wishful thinking. He laughed. Hey, that's the human way. She rolled her eyes but kept working. 10 minutes in, the warning lights flickered. Her eyes narrowed. Wait, something's off. She checked the readings. The power fluctuations weren't stabilizing. If anything, they were getting worse. Her stomach twisted. Marcus, she said, voice sharp. There's an energy buildup in the thruster core. The containment field isn't holding. A pause. Can you override it? Not fast enough. She moved fast, her claws working across the exposed wiring, trying to force a manual reset before the surge hit. Too slow. The warning alarms blared, a deep metallic groan, shaking the ship as energy raced through the unstable circuits. Sparks erupted around her, the ship lurching violently as the gravity locks failed. For a single terrifying moment, Zara was weightless. Then she was falling. The impact slammed through her body as she crashed into the lower compartment, her vision flashing white-hot from the sudden jolt of pain. Metal scraped against her scales, the force sending her spiraling downward. Then arms caught her. Strong, steady, unwavering. Marcus. The moment stretched, his grip firm, his body bracing hers against the shifting weight of the ship. Zara's breath came shallow and sharp, her chest tight with something unfamiliar. No one had ever caught her before. No one had ever been there when she fell. Her first instinct was to shove him away, to reclaim the space between them. But for a split second, just one, she let herself be held. Then she pushed against his grip, scowling. "Let go," Marcus did, stepping back without argument, though his hands hovered just slightly, like he was making sure she was actually steady before fully releasing her. "You okay?" he asked, his voice softer than usual. Zara exhaled sharply, rolling her shoulders as if brushing off the moment. "I'm fine." His gaze lingered on her, something unreadable flickering behind his eyes. Then he nodded. "Good, because we still have a ship to fix." Zara turned back to the damaged panel, forcing herself to focus. But something had shifted, something subtle, something dangerous. She didn't like it, not the fall, not the way he had caught her, and definitely not the way it had felt to be held and not let go. But for now, she pushed the thought away and went back to work. For the first time, she wasn't working alone. And maybe, just maybe, that didn't feel as wrong as she had expected. Zara had spent most of her life surviving, not thriving, not living, just existing. She had learned to rely on no one but herself. She had no allies, no comrades, no reason to expect help from anyone. And she had been fine with that, until now. She had been at Marcus's station for nearly 2 weeks, and the uncomfortable truth was that she had stayed. She could have left, could have disappeared back into the salvage yard, into the shadows where she had always belonged, but she hadn't, and that realization gnawed at her. The repair station had its own rhythm, mechanics shouting across work bays, the hum of plasma torches, the steady beep of diagnostic scanners, a constant pulse of motion and energy. It should have been overwhelming, suffocating. Instead, it was becoming familiar. She hated that, and she hated him, not in the way she had once hated the Keth warriors who had laughed at her, nor in the way she had despised the elders who had turned their backs on her. No, this was a different kind of hate, the kind that came from disruption, from something creeping into her world and changing it before she could stop it. And Marcus Kane was a disruption. She was thinking about this, about how much she resented that she was thinking about it at all when his voice cut through the noise. "Zara?" She exhaled slowly before turning. "What now, outsider?" Marcus grinned, undeterred by her ever-present irritation. "You busy?" "I'm always busy." "Great, you're coming with me." Zara narrowed her glowing crimson eyes. "Did you miss the part where I said I was busy?" Marcus didn't respond. He just started walking, not waiting for her, not even checking to see if she was following. The assumption was infuriating. Even more infuriating was the fact that, after a long moment, she did follow. He led her through the main work bay, past stacks of salvaged ship parts and half-dismantled engine cores, until they reached one of the smaller side hangars. The heavy blast doors hissed open, revealing a large cargo container, its metal plating scarred and dented from what looked like a rough landing. Zara frowned. "What am I looking at?" "Salvage team pulled this from an old human military outpost," Marcus said, running a hand over the container's reinforced edges. "Figured you might want to take a look before we break it down." Zara crossed her arms. "Why would I care?" Marcus smirked. "Because it's full of prototype tech." That caught her attention. She stepped closer, studying the markings on the crate. The security panel was fried, likely from whatever crash this thing had endured. The metal was thick, reinforced, military-grade plating, but it had seen better days. Zara pulled a small diagnostic tool from her belt and connected it to the damaged security console. Within seconds, she was bypassing the outdated encryption, rerouting power to the locking mechanism. She could feel Marcus's gaze on her as she worked. "You always this fast?" he asked. She didn't look up. "You always this annoying?" His chuckle was quiet. "You'll get used to it." She wasn't sure if that was a threat or a promise. With a final click, the lock disengaged. The doors hissed open, revealing rows of stacked crates. Some were labeled in human military script, others were unmarked. Marcus stepped inside first, activating a work lamp to illuminate the contents. Zara followed, her sharp eyes scanning the cargo. Then she froze. In the center of the container, beneath layers of dust and discarded equipment, lay a pair of mechanical legs. Not just any prosthetics, high-grade military issue augmentations. Sleek, reinforced, designed for full mobility. Zara's breath hitched before she could stop it. She knew exactly what these were. They weren't simple replacement limbs. They were combat-grade enhancements, designed for soldiers who had lost more than just mobility. Designed to give them an edge, to make them stronger, faster, better than before. Her claws flexed involuntarily. Marcus's voice was quiet. "I thought of you when I saw them." Zara stiffened. "What?" "You're smart," Marcus continued, stepping beside her. "You're probably already figuring out how they work just by looking at them." He wasn't wrong. She could see the design in her mind, the way the joints would articulate, the way the neural connectors could be modified to sync with her nervous system. But that wasn't what made her chest feel tight. It was the fact that he had thought of her at all. Zara's tail flicked, her voice coming out sharper than she intended. "I don't need them." Marcus didn't flinch. He simply nodded. "I know." Silence stretched between them. He wasn't trying to convince her, wasn't pushing, wasn't pitying her. He was just offering, and that was worse. If he had treated her like some helpless creature, she could have snarled at him, could have thrown his damn offer back in his face. But he wasn't looking at her like that. He was looking at her the way he looked at any other piece of tech, not as something broken, but as something that deserved to function at full capacity. Her voice was quiet. "I'm not broken, Marcus. I never said you were." Zara hated the way her throat felt tight, hated the way she felt cornered not by him, but by the choice he was giving her. The Keth had never given her a choice. She had adapted, had forced herself to survive, crawling and climbing and making do. But what if she didn't have to just survive? What if she could be more? She looked at the prosthetics again. Her mind was already redesigning them, improving them, making them hers. But could she let herself take them? Could she admit that she wanted to? Marcus's voice was quiet. "If you don't want them, we'll scrap them. It's your choice." That was the difference. He wasn't telling her what she should do. He was letting her decide. Zara exhaled slowly, her claws brushing against the cool metal plating of the prosthetics. The tech was solid, the potential undeniable. She could make them better. She could make them hers. Her heart pounded. She wasn't sure if it was fear or excitement. Maybe both. She looked at Marcus, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "Give me time to think." His smile was soft. "Take all the time you need." For the first time in her life, Zara didn't feel like something discarded. She felt like something worth building. Zara sat in her workshop, staring at the dismantled prosthetics on her workbench. The components lay in perfect disarray, wires coiled neatly beside neural interface modules, metal plating stacked in methodical rows, servos and actuators exposed like the inner workings of a dead machine. She had taken them apart piece by piece, analyzing every function, every flaw. The engineering was solid military grade, durable, efficient. And yet it was still wrong. Not because the tech was faulty, but because it wasn't hers. Her claws tapped idly against the table, the rhythmic clicking filling the silence. She had been avoiding the decision for days, dissecting the prosthetics like a puzzle she had no intention of solving. Every night she told herself she would leave them alone, and every morning she came back, drawn to them like a gravitational pull she couldn't resist. She exhaled sharply and leaned back, her crimson eyes narrowing as she studied the half-dismantled limbs. They looked like they belonged to someone else. Because they did. She had spent her entire life learning how to move without legs, mastering her own way of crawling, climbing, slithering, adapting. The idea of strapping on a pair of foreign limbs, of suddenly being able to walk like it had never been a struggle, it felt like a lie. Like erasing everything she had been before. Her tail flicked, irritated at her own hesitation. The Keth warriors had made it clear from the moment she was born, she would never be one of them. No matter how intelligent, no matter how skilled, she would always be less in their eyes. A memory surfaced unbidden. She was sick, small, fragile, still clinging to the belief that she could prove them wrong. The training halls were filled with young warriors, their bodies sleek and powerful, moving in perfect synchronization, tails lashing as they dodged and struck in brutal, elegant patterns. Zara had crawled to the edge of the arena, watching. She wanted to be one of them. She tried. She dragged herself forward, attempted to mimic their movements, to train alongside them. They noticed. "Look at it." The voice had been sharp, mocking. "Crawling like an insect." The laughter that followed stung worse than any wound. One of the warriors, a towering young male, had stepped forward. He looked at her with thinly veiled disgust, his sharp features twisted in amusement. "You're not one of us," he had said, his tail curling lazily around his feet. "You never will be." Then, without warning, he kicked her. Not hard enough to break anything, but hard enough to send her sprawling onto the rough stone floor, her claws scraping against the surface as pain jolted through her ribs. More laughter. More voices. Pathetic. Maybe if it had legs, it wouldn't be so useless. Maybe it should crawl away. She had refused to cry, refused to let them see how badly it hurt. Instead, she had memorized their faces, had burned their laughter into her mind until it became fuel. That was the moment she stopped wanting to be one of them. That was the moment she decided she would never need them. Now, sitting in the quiet hum of her workshop, staring at the prosthetic legs, she wondered, if she put them on, was she proving them right? Or was she proving that she had never needed their acceptance in the first place? A sharp knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Still thinking? Zara exhaled and glanced toward the entrance. Marcus was leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, his usual easy smirk in place. She gestured toward the dismantled prosthetics. They were inefficient. Marcus's gaze flickered to the carefully deconstructed pieces of what had once been state-of-the-art military enhancement. He let out a low whistle. "I'm guessing you weren't impressed," she scoffed. "They were designed for humans first. Everything else is an afterthought." He nodded, stepping inside. "So what's the plan?" Zara hesitated. "I haven't decided yet." Marcus studied her for a long moment before speaking. "What's stopping you?" She frowned, turning back to the workbench. "If I do this, I don't know what that makes me." Marcus didn't answer immediately. He leaned against the table, arms still crossed, as if weighing his words carefully. "It makes you you," he said finally. "Just faster." Zara let out a sharp exhale, almost a laugh. "That's the best argument you have?" Marcus shrugged. "I could throw in a motivational speech, but I figured you'd just roll your eyes." She smirked despite herself. He wasn't wrong. Then, after a long pause, he spoke again, softer this time. "I get it, you know." She raised an eyebrow. "Do you?" Marcus's gaze darkened just slightly. "I wasn't always a mechanic. I trained for combat. Thought that's what I was meant to do. Then, on my first mission he stopped, exhaling slowly. "Let's just say I screwed up. Someone got hurt because of me. Someone who trusted me." Zara watched him carefully. "I walked away after that," he continued. "Figured if I couldn't be what I was supposed to be, then I'd be nothing at all." He glanced at her. "Sound familiar?" Her throat tightened. She didn't answer, but Marcus didn't seem to need her to. "The thing is," he said, "you can spend your whole life holding on to what you thought you were supposed to be. Or you can build something new." Zara stared at the prosthetics, at the cold metal, at the possibility lying in front of her. She could make them hers. She could forge something new. Her tail flicked once, slowly, deliberately. She picked up one of the neural interface modules and began to rebuild. Marcus's smirk widened, but he didn't say anything. He just nodded. For the first time, Zara wasn't looking back. She was building forward. Zara's hands were steady as she made the final adjustments. The newly modified prosthetic legs gleamed under the soft artificial light of her workshop. The standard military-grade plating had been stripped away, replaced with sleeker, reinforced alloys built for speed, precision, and endurance. She had reworked the neural interface from the ground up, improving its response latency, optimizing its power efficiency, and fine-tuning the movement algorithms so that every step would feel natural, not artificial. They were hers now. She had spent nights rebuilding them, reshaping them into something that felt right. And now they sat before her, not foreign, not unfamiliar, but something she had created, something that belonged to her. She took a slow breath. Then she reached for them. The process of attaching them wasn't entirely painless. The prosthetics locked into place with a cold hiss, the connectors fusing with her nerve receptors, sending a jolt through her spine like a sudden shock of energy awakening dormant muscles. For a moment, her vision blurred, the overload flooding her senses as her body adjusted to the foreign limbs. Then stillness. Zara flexed her claws. She could feel them. Not the metal, not the plating, but the motion itself, like an extension of her own body. She placed her hands on the edge of the workbench and pushed herself up. For the first time in her life, she stood. Her balance wavered for half a second before the adaptive stabilizers corrected, compensating for the unfamiliar weight distribution. The neural interface responded seamlessly, adjusting to every micro movement. Her breath caught in her throat. It was easy, too easy. her tail curled behind her in tension. She had spent her whole life dragging herself forward, using her upper body strength to climb, crawl, adapt. She had never known what it was like to simply stand without struggle. It felt wrong, like she had skipped a step, like she had taken the easy way out. A sharp knock at the workshop door pulled her from her thoughts. Did you finally stop overthinking it and put them on? Zara scowled. No, I'm floating midair, outsider. Marcus let out a low whistle as he stepped inside, his gaze sweeping over her standing form. He wasn't grinning this time. His usual easygoing confidence was there, but there was something else in his expression, something unreadable, something like understanding. How do they feel? He asked. Zara hesitated. She wanted to say wrong. She wanted to say unnatural. But that wasn't the truth. They work, she muttered instead, glancing down at the sleek black plating covering her lower half. Yeah, no kidding. You built them, Marcus said, arms crossed. But do they feel like yours? Zara flexed her toes, testing the pressure response. The servos adjusted instantly, reacting with the same ease as real muscle fibers. The sensation was strange. They don't feel like something I was given, she admitted slowly. They feel like something I took. Marcus grinned. Good, that's how it should be. She rolled her eyes. Spare me the philosophy. Hey, if you're here to watch me walk, get it over with. Marcus's grin widened. Actually, I was going to say if you're up for it, I could use a hand. There's a situation in the main hangar. Zara narrowed her eyes. What kind of situation? His smirk faded. Keth. Her blood went cold. She hadn't encountered her own kind in months, not since she had chosen to stay at Marcus's station, working among humans instead of warriors. The last time she had seen a Keth soldier, they had barely acknowledged her existence, treating her like an unworthy defect, a disgrace to their species. Marcus must have noticed the tension in her shoulders because his tone softened. You don't have to get involved. Zara clenched her jaw. No, she didn't have to, but she wanted to. She wanted to know why they were here. She wanted to know if they had come looking for her. And more than that, she wanted to face them standing. She turned toward the door. Let's go. The main hangar was filled with tension. Mechanics paused their work, eyes flicking toward the group of 3 Keth warriors standing near the docking platform. They were tall, broad-shouldered, covered in iridescent crimson scales, their gold-plated armor etched with the sigils of their warrior caste. Zara recognized their markings. They were high-ranking, not just warriors but enforcers. They weren't here by accident. One of them turned, and his cold, slitted eyes locked onto hers. A slow smirk curled his lips. Zara, her claws twitched. She knew him. Vex. He had been among the young warriors who had mocked her, taunted her, kicked her down when she was small and weak. He had been one of the many who told her she would never be one of them. And yet here he was, looking at her, acknowledging her. Marcus stepped slightly in front of her, his voice even. Something I can help you with? Vex's gaze flicked to him, then back to Zara. We're not here for you, outsider. His smirk widened. We're here for her. The room felt too small, too tense. Zara forced her voice to remain steady. What? Vex stepped forward, and the other 2 warriors followed in perfect formation. He didn't look at the prosthetics, didn't acknowledge them, but Zara knew he had noticed. We heard rumors, Vex said smoothly, that the exile had traded her heritage for human scraps. Zara's tail flicked behind her, her stance shifting automatically. For the first time, she felt the balance of her new legs, the weight distribution, the power coiled in the servos, and something in her snapped. Last I checked, she said, her voice cold. I wasn't given a choice in being an exile. Vex chuckled. And yet you made the choice to stay here, among them, crawling to them for help. His voice was low, taunting. Tell me, Zara, do you still crawl? Marcus shifted beside her. You should watch your tone. Zara barely heard him. She took a step forward. The sound was sharp metal on metal, her prosthetics striking the floor with a definitive, unshakable rhythm. Vex's smirk faltered, just slightly. Zara stopped an arm's length away, tilting her head. Crawling? She echoed. Then she moved, fast. Before Vex could react, she kicked forward, striking the ground and using the enhanced propulsion of her new legs to launch herself straight at him. He barely had time to block. The impact shook the hangar floor, sending him stumbling backward, his claws scraping against the metal as he tried to regain balance. Zara landed smoothly, effortless, controlled, powerful. She stood over him now, looking down at him, and when she spoke, her voice was calm, steady, and lethal. I don't crawl anymore. The silence that followed Zara's words was thick with unspoken weight. The air in the hangar was tense, the onlookers frozen, watching the moment unfold like a tightly wound coil waiting to snap. Vex pushed himself up from the ground, his expression flickering between shock, anger, and something else, something dangerously close to respect. He wasn't used to being challenged, least of all by her. Zara held her ground. She felt it now, the power in her stance, the stability of her prosthetic legs, the undeniable presence she commanded. The girl who had once crawled before these warriors was gone. In her place stood something new, stronger, faster, unapologetic. Vex's slitted eyes narrowed, but his smirk had lost its cruel amusement. He took a slow step forward, tilting his head. So you finally stand, he said. Zara lifted her chin. I always did. You just never looked. A beat of silence. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. Not a mocking laugh, but something deep, rumbling, and grudgingly approving. The other Deketh warriors exchanged wary glances but didn't interfere. Vex straightened, rolling his shoulders as if testing his own pride for injuries. I was wrong about you, he admitted. But tell me, Zara, do you think standing makes you one of us now? Zara's tail flicked behind her, her claws flexing at her sides. The answer came easily. No. Vex raised a brow. Zara took a slow step forward, her enhanced servos adjusting seamlessly, her every movement precise, controlled, deliberate. I don't need to be one of you. I don't need to prove anything to anyone but myself. She let the words settle before adding, deadly calm, and if you ever speak to me like I'm beneath you again, I'll put you back on the ground. Harder. For a moment, it felt like the whole station held its breath. Then Vex grinned, a true warrior's grin, the kind reserved for equals. Good. And just like that, he turned away, gesturing to the others. We're done here. Zara didn't move as she watched them leave, the heavy clank of their boots fading into the corridors. The tension in the hangar slowly dissolved, the human mechanics exchanging uneasy glances before cautiously returning to their work. Marcus, however, hadn't moved. He stood just a few feet away, arms crossed, his gaze locked on her like he was seeing her for the first time all over again. Zara shifted, suddenly aware of the way he was looking at her. Not with amusement, not with concern, but with something else. Something warmer. She huffed. What? Marcus's smirk was slow, teasing. I don't know. It's just this is kind of a big moment. Thought you'd want a dramatic celebration or something. Zara rolled her eyes. I don't do dramatic celebrations. Not even a little bit? He gestured vaguely at the hangar. I mean, you just verbally drop-kicked a guy who used to throw you around like scrap metal. That's got to feel good. Zara would never admit it, but it did. Still, she crossed her arms. I don't need validation, outsider. Marcus stepped closer, voice dropping just slightly. Didn't say you did. The shift in the air was subtle but undeniable. Zara could hear the distant hum of machinery, the faint chatter of workers, but in that moment, it all blurred into the background. She was aware of Marcus in a way that felt different. She had known him long enough now to recognize when he was being his usual irritatingly confident self. But this wasn't that. There was no teasing in his voice, no smirk playing at his lips. Just Marcus, looking at her like she was something worth looking at. Zara swallowed. You're staring. Marcus tilted his head, unconcerned. Yeah, I am. She opened her mouth to fire back a sharp retort, but nothing came. Because for the first time, she didn't feel the need to push him away. For the first time, she didn't feel like she had to prove herself to him. He had never doubted her strength, never questioned her worth. And maybe that scared her more than anything. She shifted her weight on her new legs, testing them, grounding herself. The feeling was solid, steady, real. Her voice was quieter when she spoke again. I thought you didn't care about dramatic moments. Marcus's lips twitched into something that wasn't quite a smirk, softer, more honest. I don't, he said, but I care about you. The words hit her like a shock to the system, her mind short-circuiting for a fraction of a second. She had been prepared for mockery, for another challenge, for anything but that. And yet here it was simple, undeniable. Marcus Kane cared about her. The realization settled slowly, cautiously, dangerously. Zara exhaled, watching him for a long moment. Then finally, she let herself smile, small, almost imperceptible, but real. Come on, outsider, she murmured, brushing past him. Let's get out of here. She didn't see Marcus's grin widen as he followed her, but she felt it. For the first time in her life, Zara wasn't walking away from something. She was walking towards something new, something that felt a lot like belonging, and she wasn't alone. The stars stretched endlessly above the station's open docking platform, a vast ocean of light and darkness that had once felt distant, untouchable. Zara stood at the edge of the platform, looking out at the endless expanse of space, the cold air of the night brushing against her skin. She had always imagined that when this moment came, the moment she finally stood on her own terms, she would feel vindicated, defiant, unshaken. Instead, she felt weightless. Not the kind of weightlessness she had experienced when the gravity locks failed and she had fallen. Not the kind that came from being left behind. This was different. This was the weightlessness of not knowing what came next. For so long, her life had been defined by a singular truth: survival, adaptation, solitude. She had never thought beyond that, never dared to imagine a future beyond crawling, fighting, proving, enduring. And now the question terrified her, because for the first time, the answer was hers to decide. A familiar voice broke through her thoughts. "You're thinking too hard again." Zara turned her head just slightly. Marcus stood a few steps away, hands in his pockets. His usual grin softened into something quieter, something more patient. "I don't think you're used to standing still," he added, his tone light but knowing. Zara huffed, looking back at the stars. "Standing still is a waste of time." Marcus stepped closer. "Maybe. Or maybe it's just the first step before moving forward." His meaning wasn't lost on her. Zara exhaled, flexing her claws as she shifted her weight slightly, feeling the subtle response of her prosthetics, the way they moved, as if they had always been a part of her. A part of her wanted to run. Not out of fear, but out of habit. Because she had never stayed in one place for too long, never let herself become attached to anything or anyone. Marcus had become the exception to that rule, and that was dangerous. She turned to face him fully. "You never asked me why I really stayed." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Didn't have to. I figured you'd tell me when you were ready." Zara studied him for a long moment. His expression held no expectations, no pressure, just quiet certainty. He had always been like that, hadn't he? Always waiting, never pushing, never demanding more than she was willing to give. She swallowed. "I stayed because..." Her voice faltered for half a second. "Because leaving meant going back to nothing." Marcus didn't speak. He just listened. Zara clenched her jaw. "I don't belong with the Keth. I never did. And I don't want to." She let out a slow breath. "But I didn't think I could belong anywhere else either." Something flickered in Marcus's expression, something warm, steady, grounding. "And now?" he asked. Zara hesitated. Then she took a step forward, closing the space between them. She met his gaze, her voice quieter this time. "Now I think I was wrong." Marcus's lips curved into the smallest of smiles, but he didn't look smug. He didn't gloat like he had won something. Instead, he just said, gently, "Good." Zara's chest felt tight, but not in the way it used to. Not with anger, not with bitterness, with something else entirely. She shook her head. "You're really bad at dramatic speeches," Marcus chuckled. "Yeah, well, you're really bad at pretending you don't care." Zara narrowed her eyes. "I don't." He took her hand. It wasn't rushed, wasn't forced, just a simple, steady motion, his fingers wrapping around hers like it was the most natural thing in the world. Zara should have pulled away. She didn't. She just stared at their joined hands, her heart beating. Too fast, too loud. Marcus's voice was quieter now. "You don't have to go anywhere you don't want to." Zara swallowed. For years, she had thought strength meant standing alone. Now, standing beside him, she realized strength could also mean choosing not to be alone anymore. Her grip on his hand tightened slightly, not a desperate grasp, not a hesitant reach, just acceptance. Zara exhaled, the stars above them stretching infinitely forward, like a future she had never dared to imagine. Now she could. Now she would. And this time, she wasn't walking into it alone.